Here's a call that came in from one of our listeners named Billy.
I am just calling social justice, right? What's the difference between social justice and biblical justice? I think the terms are getting intertwined, and we're losing biblical justice for a social justice gospel, and which then just replaces the gospel of Jesus and the gospel of Paul. And what would you do? Or is there any good resources out there that we can say, hey, listen, this is what the culture is saying about social justice. Here's what the Bible teaches us about justice and the actual gospel according to Christ. So that's all I got. Thank you for your ministry. It's awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Hey, Billy, appreciate that question. And this is definitely one that has been on a lot of people's minds, especially over the last couple of years, I think, as there have been a lot of conversations surrounding the question of biblical justice, social justice, what our obligations are as Christians in society. Now, first, you mentioned the social gospel. And I think it's important that we understand what that is, that we define that well. Defining our terms here is so important. And, you know, in the history of the church, there was a period of time where people were beginning to reject essentially the miracles of the Bible. You think of the 19th and 20th century. And they were saying, look, Christianity is not really about the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, these miracles. I mean, the modern man can't believe those things. We need to go back to the heart of the gospel, the kernel of the gospel. It was argued by German theologians like Adolf von Harnack, who I would not recommend you go read. But and they're saying, look, the kernel, the essence of the gospel is love your neighbor. Be engaged in society and these social justice issues. And that's what people can really get on board with. That's what they can really get behind. This is the way that we're going to save Christianity. We need to do away with the miracles, with justification by grace through faith, all of that stuff that the modern man can't embrace anymore, and just talk about loving our neighbors. Now, that is a false gospel because it turns the gospel into something we do, not something that God has done. The good news of Christianity is not that we love our neighbors. It's not that we're engaged in social issues. It's that God loved his enemies and sent his son Jesus into the world to be the propitiation for our sins so that we might be justified in the sight of God even though we're sinners. And having said that, though, there's something I think that we also miss a lot today. And that's that, I mean, I think part of the issue is because, you know, everything is so politicized and we hear these sort of trigger words, you know, social justice, and we think about, you know, all the baggage that maybe is in our mind from some of the political discussion. And we're not able to see or hear, I think, the Bible's teaching on this clearly. When we talk about biblical justice, brothers and sisters, let me just say, the Bible is concerned with social justice. Biblical justice is inherently social. It has to do with how we relate to our neighbors, the people around us. And God is concerned for the people around us, for our neighbors. You think it is the second table of the law in terms of loving the people around us, loving our neighbor as ourselves. And how does Jesus define our neighbor? Well, it's not just the people who look, think, and act like we do, the people who are Christians. It's the outsider even. And this is something God has always been concerned with. I go back to the book of Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 1, God is rebuking his people because while they get worship right, quote unquote, you know, they're doing the sacrifices and going through the motions of worship, they have failed with regard to justice. There's this huge issue. So Isaiah chapter 1, listen to what God says to his people there. Verse 12, when you come to appear before me, who has required of you this trampling of my courts? Bring no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath and the calling of convocations. I cannot endure iniquity and solemn assembly. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Remove the evil of your deeds from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice. Correct oppression. Bring justice to the fatherless and plead the widow's cause. You see how God here is concerned with how his people treat their neighbors, in particular, the vulnerable in society, the widow, the orphan. These are issues of social justice and issues of the second table of the law, how we love our neighbors. And so one of my concerns in this discussion is that we don't just sort of pit biblical justice against social justice, but that we realize that in one sense, very clearly, biblical justice is inherently social. Now, that doesn't mean that we just embrace the broader society's definition of what is just and what isn't just. There are many things in our culture that people in society think are perfectly just, which God says are not just. I think of the way in which, as a society, we treat the unborn, for example. But there are ways also where the church has erred in this regard. You think of the church's history with things like slavery, injustices that the church has tried to, or Christians have tried to at various points in history, tried to justify. And so we really have to, brothers and sisters, go back to the scriptures, search them with humility and say, God, what does it look like for me to love my neighbors, the people who are around me? That's a part of social justice. And so I think that there are a couple of different ditches that we can reckon that we have to avoid. We can reckon that in the ditch of the social gospel, where we're saying we're justified by our good deeds and the way in which we love our neighbor. But we can also reckon the ditch that the people of God reckoned there in Isaiah chapter 1, which is going through the motions of religion without truly loving justice, our neighbors. And of course, we're not justified by that, but the people of God who are shaped by, formed by the gospel, should be a people who love their neighbors, who are concerned with the needs around them, the needs of the poor, the needs of the marginalized, the needs of the unborn. And that's just a part of loving God as we're called to and loving our neighbor as ourselves. God bless. Hey friends, thanks for watching that video. I trust that it was encouraging to you. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're looking for more great content coming from Core Christianity. And if you haven't done so yet, would you give this video a like? It's one of the ways that we can continue to get the word out. So like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content. May the Lord bless you.